All right, everyone. Jeremy Knopf here with another episode of the Public Relations Declassified Livestream. We're doing this remotely, so we may have some little tech gremlins, so bear with us if we have any issues. Got a bunch of topics we're going to cover here today, and we've got a special guest with us in the studio who we'll be bringing up for the second segment. The first thing we're going to talk about is the hidden risks of PR, or the hidden PR risks, rather, of AI. So before we jump into this, I want to share something about this little picture here. I was looking at this when we put this together for the show. And man, this robot, while he looks a little bit spooky and a little bit evil, he doesn't quite look mean. He kind of looks like he's not mad, but just disappointed in you. Kind of reminds me of that old thing that all of our parents used to say whenever we fucked up, right? But what we're going to talk about is some of the ways that AI can really fuck things up for you in public relations. So I love certain aspects of AI. It's really useful for certain things, but it's incredibly dangerous for other things. So one of the things I like to use it for is automating certain tasks, especially if they're boring, mundane, very detail-oriented tasks. I also like to use it for analyzing large data sets. One of the things I've done with it a lot is dumping in a huge pile of data and asking for a summary of it, or asking for it to extract certain information. Now, there is a caveat here, and that is that you cannot rely on whatever it tells you about the data that it pulls out. You still have to verify it, but it's a really good way to get your hands around a lot of data and make sense of it a lot faster than if you go through it and just kind of pour through it all on your own. You can also use it for rough planning. I like to use it for brainstorming, coming up with ideas, coming up with strategies, even coming up with outlines. You know, if you wanted to make some content or you wanted to frame out a pitch that you're going to send to journalists, you can find some key topics to hit on in that pitch. So it's really good for things like this. But where AI tends to drop the ball pretty often is the first is using it for anything that you're writing, right? So it can be really effective at helping you write, but part of the problem is it makes you sound like everyone else, right? AI is all running off of these same models. And what will happen is you can put in a great outline. In fact, I did this with a piece of content I was trying to put together a while back, where I developed these really robust outlines, and they were great. They were super comprehensive. They had all the information that we needed. And then I had AI spit out this stuff, and I'm like, man, this is really great. It's giving me all this content. It reads really well. It's informative. Of course, it's informative because it goes off the outline that I put together. But once I really started reading it, I'm like, man, it's not bad, but it just has no soul. It doesn't have my voice. And a key part of public relations is really standing out. You have to differentiate yourself. Not just in, what you're saying, but how you say it. It has to convey your personality. You're an expert at something. Whatever it is that you do, you have a very special, unique knowledge there. But then beyond that is how you deliver the information. So if you're delivering this information in a way that doesn't really make any sense, like it's not coming across as you, it's very cold, it's very clinical, it's boring, nobody's going to really be drawn into that. It's not going to resonate. And that's true both in the pitch and in the responses. Now, obviously, this also applies to your content, right? If you're using AI to create your content, well, then your content's going to be pretty fucking boring. It's not going to have your heart, your soul, kind of your personality, the unique flair that you bring to it. So where I've seen a lot of people go wrong is they'll use AI to write a pitch. And this is something that journalists are complaining about a lot. I'm going to talk about this a little bit more in a second, but journalists do not like being pitched with AI pitches. It irritates the hell out of them for a lot of reasons, which I've covered on some of the previous live streams. They feel like AI is kind of encroaching into their world, their territory. One of the things that they do, of course, is they create content, whether it's text, right? They're writing articles, print or digital, or they're doing TV segments. So their whole world revolves around words. and they kind of see that as an encroachment into their world. So do not use AI in your pitches. Do not use AI in your responses. Yes, that will help you to get them out faster, but it will not help them to land. It's not going to help you get that media feature. So we want to avoid that. And as I'm talking about the fact that it's lacking, your personality, your soul, so to speak, that's huge, because when you're communicating with a journalist, you're telling them not just facts, but you're also bringing your real world experience to it. You're sharing stories that you've experienced in doing whatever it is that you do. And AI cannot do that for you. So because that's not there, you're going to miss out on opportunities, while the people who are using their real words, their own experience, their own opinions, they're going to land those opportunities and you're not. So don't do that. And remember, this is really easy to spot. I mentioned that they work with words all day, whether it's text, whether it's TV, whether it's podcasts, whatever. This is something they deal with all the time. They're communications professionals. So there's certain nuance to AI that makes it pretty easy to spot. Most people can't spot it because, let's be honest, most people are not good communicators. They don't communicate clearly. They don't communicate effectively in a persuasive and engaging way. So most people don't see the little flaws in AI that somebody who deals with communications all day, every day does see. So we want to avoid that. Like I said, they hate it. There's even, I've mentioned before some of these private groups that exist where journalists communicate. They talk about what's going on in the industry. They talk about sources that they're looking for. They need a particular expert on a thing. They also talk about some of the dumb shit that people do when they're pitching them or when they're giving them their responses. And AI is one of the biggest things that they complain about. And a lot of times they will name you. They will basically put you on a list, so to speak. And other journalists will blacklist you. So if you're using AI, it's a good way to not only miss that opportunity, but also miss out on future opportunities as well. So the problem here is also you've got hallucinations. I'm going to pull up one here. We've got this great example of a Google AIO. Now, I've talked about some of the AIOs in Google and how they're absolutely horrible. If you have not seen these, basically this is when you search for a particular thing, Google gives this little kind of summary at the top of the search results now for certain terms. And in this particular case, if you're looking at this on a mobile device, you probably can't read this, but this is about cheese sliding off of pizza. And one of the suggestions that Google's AIO gives to prevent cheese from sliding off of your pizza is to use 1/8 of a cup of non-toxic glue to keep it on there, right? So AI has this huge problem with hallucinations. They'll just make up data. And this is where AI can really hurt you, because if you're using it, and let's say you use it to craft a response, and you're giving that journalist information that is not real, that can get out there. Let's say that they don't catch it. They don't notice that it's AI. They include it. Now that is in that article or it's in that TV segment, and the internet is forever. So this is out here, and it's going to live on, and it's going to make you look bad from now until the end of time. And heaven forbid somebody sees it in your industry and they start talking about it. And now you've got people in your industry questioning your credibility, and that hurts you long term. So there was a great example that popped up just yesterday, in fact, while I was at the airport. And this was from the Chicago Sun-Times. I was notified about this by Indie Book Spotlight. This is a great little, for all of you who are authors, you guys should connect with them and follow them. But this is a great Twitter account, X account, that promotes authors, independent authors. So those of you who are not with one of the big publishing companies. And they told me about this article that came out in the Chicago Sun-Times summer reading list for 2025. Problem is, these books don't exist. The author of this piece used AI to write this article, and it completely made up a number of titles. It attributed them to real authors. I think all of them were real authors, but none of the titles were real. They didn't exist. And the summaries, I don't even remember where the summaries came from or if it just kind of put together made up summaries. But it really damaged the credibility of this media outlet, particularly of the journalists that published it. And unfortunately for them, they tried to backpedal and say they don't know how it happened. It was a mistake. But it not only went into a digital piece, but it also went into a print piece. Now, if you don't have background in the publishing side of the world, I can see how an article would accidentally get published on a digital publication. There's a lot of ways that people set up automations for various things, and that very easily could fall through the cracks and make it through without being seen. But to go into a print publication and actually go through the whole layout process, get put together, go through print, then it gets proofed before they actually run the full run of that print magazine. There's no way in hell that happens. So definitely put a big black eye on that outlet. The journalist is probably going to end up getting fired. And this is the kind of thing that will probably track them for a while. But this happens to a lot of people. They'll put a piece of information out there that they got from AI. They will have information in it that's not real. Either it's incorrect or it's completely hallucinated. And then that damages your reputation, potentially for years to come. It's really hard to come back from that. So if you're going to use AI for anything like this, use it to pull together the data, but then go back through and verify everything that it gives you. All right, that's how you're going to avoid falling into a situation like this. All right, so next up, we're going to talk about a little budding PR crisis. This is a company called Silencer Central, and this PR crisis is far from silent. Now, a little bit of background here. This company lobbied against a bill called the Hearing Protection Act. And basically, this is a law that they're trying to repeal some of the things that are going on with the NFA that make silencers a restricted item. There's no logical reason for silencers not to be legal. We're not going to get into the 2A side of things. The reality is this absolutely should be repealed. The NFA shouldn't exist. But this company, Silencer Central, is running lobbying efforts towards keeping that in place. Now, they put out a notice. They were called out online pretty quickly. The firearms community is very tight-knit. They're very active. And when somebody does something that they feel is an infringement, or somebody that's working against their interests, especially since you consider there's so many groups out there that are trying to infringe on the Second Amendment, they take that very seriously. Now, I stumbled across it when I saw a friend of mine responding to their bullshit statement, where they're basically claiming, "Oh, we never lobbied against that. We're fully supportive of everything about the Second Amendment." Blah blah blah. My friend Carrie Sloan called them out quite effectively, I might add, and brought receipts to the table showing their lobbying efforts. Now, this is interesting because all lobbying efforts are tracked. It's all federal information, so it's all public record. And so she came and she brought all this information showing that they have been actively lobbying against this. Whole bunch of stuff here, a whole bunch of data. So what we're going to do here, we're going to pull Carrie up here in a little bit. But let's talk before we do that about why they would do something like this. I'm looking forward to hearing Carrie's thoughts on this. I didn't get a chance to talk to her a lot about it. I was traveling yesterday. But the first thing that I see is that they would do this because it creates a barrier to entry in that industry. Silencers are pretty expensive on the lower end. And Carrie, when you come on in a little bit, you can correct me if I'm wrong. I think the lower end, you're looking at about $600 for a suppressor. I know they go up quite a bit beyond that as well. I don't know exactly how high. But part of the reason that they cost what they cost is because not every company can do this. There's a lot of federal regulation around the silencer industry, firearms industry in general, but especially the silencer industry. And so by there being all of this regulation, there's very little competition. There's only a handful of companies that manufacture silencers legally in the US. So if there's no tax stamp requirement, no federal registration for this through the NFA Act, basically competition can spring up overnight. And now you have a driving down of the price because other companies are coming to the market. They're competing, they're manufacturing them, whether it's local, whether it's overseas. And if other companies can come and manufacture, now they have to not only compete on quality, but also on price. So I'm going to go ahead and pull up Carrie here, and we're going to talk a little bit about her perspective from the firearms industry. Now, Carrie runs a nonprofit organization. Chris, go ahead and bring Carrie up on cam, please. Carrie runs a nonprofit organization called, I just blanked out, Carrie. Refresh my memory, please.
It's called We the Female, and essentially our mission is we arm the women with education, confidence, and self-defense. I'm a trauma-informed firearm instructor, and I teach all over the country, so I get a very unique perspective on gun rights and people's perception of gun control laws, because I have the opportunity to teach all over the country.
Awesome. Now, for those of you who don't know Carrie, she's an absolute rock star.
Thank you.
Every time I turn around, she's traveling somewhere, teaching people about firearms. Tons and tons of knowledge, very tapped into the firearms community. So, Carrie, let's talk a little bit about what you saw. That thread was an absolute dumpster fire.
Yeah,
tell me
it was pretty bad.
What did you see from an industry perspective, how people were reacting to that?
Well, for the most part, you saw most people reacting the way that I did, and particularly after the receipts were displayed. It was interesting. There were the people that defended them just because you're always going to see that. And typically that's done based on biases. Oftentimes, particularly in the gun industry, you'll see those defenses come from people who partner with or get free things or are sponsored by these companies, and they're going to be, for obvious reasons, a little more defensive of them. I mean, they're helping to pay their bills. So, I mean, I don't agree with it, but I understand why people would, regardless of my personal opinion on it. But at the end of the day, this isn't the first time we've seen this happen. I mean, this is not the first company that's done it, and we can go back. I mean, SIG is another one that's real recent. Some of the other, many of you will be able to think of other companies out there. Dick's is one. There's been plenty where they end up getting caught. Black Rifle Coffee was one. They get caught doing things on the backside that they shouldn't be doing, and then they try to cover their asses with some ridiculous statement. And in this case, with Silencer Company, this is Silencer Company because there's Silencer Central, Silencer Co., Silencer Company. There's all kinds of different ones out there. And apparently they thought that people were too stupid to be able to research and find these receipts, to which I posted, which were the actual donation receipts, for lack of a better term, literally and metaphorically, that they donated over $100,000 to lobbyists to lobby to keep certain pieces of the silencer regulation in place. And that's kind of the big debate that's going on right now. There are two bills, there's two pieces of a bill that are in fact, we'll be hearing later today what's going on with them. And one of them is called the HPA, which is what this is in relation to, and it's the Hearing Protection Act. And that's really what suppressors are, is particularly for people who work in the business professionally, it's hearing protection. What you see in the media about suppressors is not what they call them silencers, and they make them completely silent. And if you're a shooter, you know better. You know that that's not the case. But, again, just like all the other fear mongering and PR that a lot of anti-gunners have put out, and the perception Hollywood has a huge driving force behind it, they gave money to keep components of the NFA, the National Firearms Act, for suppressors in place. But they did it under the guise of it being for conservation for hunters. And we all knew that was bullshit. And they didn't get away with it. They got caught. And instead of just being transparent about it, as they should have been in the beginning, or even being better about their spin, I mean, that was kind of an interesting thing, right? Because everything is a spin. You're in PR, you know that. They could have even come in and said, well, yes, we did do it under the guise of conservation, and here's why. They didn't even go there. They just assumed that everybody was going to be dumb and not catch it, and certain people didn't. And then there were those of us that did. And of course, now you're saying that's not going well for them.
Yes. Well, you know, and one of the things that I talk about a lot is the importance of transparency. Yeah. And they completely dropped the ball on that. You know, they basically tried to just deny it. Yeah. And you can't deny it. Everything is available online today. We have information at our fingertips at a moment's notice, 24/7. So that's, I mean, aside from it not working, that's just stupid, because not only are you trying to lie, but you're essentially telling your customer base, hey, we think you guys are a bunch of fucking morons and you're not going to catch us. And that's never a good look.
It isn't. And, you know, especially in the gun industry where it's already, I mean, arguably, and I would say that it's a pretty solid argument that the Second Amendment is the most politically contested and biggest hotbed in the Constitution. You know, there's always something going on with it, whether at the state or federal level, this obviously being at the federal level. And this, we see this, we have seen, I don't want to say it, we have seen epic PR failures from other let me qualify that, 2A companies before. And so I think one of the biggest takeaways here, obviously, is their PR disaster on the surface, but is just the I was going to say that they're being obtuse, but it's bigger than that. Just their failure to learn the lessons from these other companies when they tried to pull the same thing and try to play it off and blow it off and make excuses, and that failed. And so I can't decide what's worse, the fact that they tried to pull this or the fact that they didn't learn their lesson from some of these other companies that clearly got bit in the ass themselves, Sig Sauer being one of the biggest ones right now. Mm-hmm. You know, Dick's was one of them. Black Rifle Coffee was one of them. I could go on, right? There's a list of them. Yeah, at some point, these people are going to need to start learning their lesson, especially now. And gosh, now that we have ChatGPT and Grok, I hardly even Google things anymore because I Google it for reinforcement. But they aggregate all of this data that's out there now, and I'm a fan of it. You know, it's made research a million times easier, especially certain platforms of AI. The way that they can give the pros and cons and balanced arguments on it, it's pretty impressive. So at some point, I'm hoping to see some of these companies, whether in or out of the gun industry, start understanding that they can't get away with this anymore, and maybe it'll start making them straighten up. Because they really did it because they make money. If Hearing Protection Act passes and suppressors are removed from the NFA, which means that the tax stamp isn't there, it means that people will be able to start essentially building great suppressors at home for $50. And so that's the real reason that they wanted to keep the Hearing Protection Act from passing, and that they've been lobbying to keep it in the NFA. It's because of their making money with it, and shame on you. Shame on you for exploiting gun owners and making hearing protection less available.
Absolutely. One of the big things I always tell people is your values have to align with your target market. And if 100%. They don't, you either have to change your values or change your target market. You can't try to have one foot in each side of the equation. And they're failing to do that. And it's really, in one sense, it's appalling, but it's also surprising because there's so many examples, even just in the firearms industry. You know, you and I talked about Dick's. For those who don't know, Dick's came out following a shooting this was, I think, around 2012, and basically removed all AR style rifles from all of their stores and started lobbying against that kind of stuff. And the 2A community absolutely decimated their brand.
They lost millions of dollars, by the way, in revenue after doing that. It was very foolish on their part.
Cheaper Than Dirt was another one. That was man, I must have bought tens of thousands of rounds of ammo from Cheaper Than Dirt. I have not bought anything from them since about 2012.
It's funny. I completely, until I got the summary from you, I completely forgot Cheaper Than Dirt even existed because I wouldn't, I just, they went in the book of the dead, as we call it in my house.
Yes, indeed. And I know a lot of people who feel the same way. Honestly, I don't think the brand is going to recover from this.
I don't think so either. I hope not.
I feel the same. The 2A community is very loyal and also very vengeful. And, part of that is because the Second Amendment rights are always under attack from all kinds of groups. So, there's been a lot of compromise, and then that compromise is never met with equal compromise on the other side. And so, people are obviously very skeptical of any kind of further restrictions. But what I have found is we expect that from certain groups. But when it comes from inside the community, people are especially vengeful about that. And, I just don't think that they recover from this. I think they're gonna be relegated into the realms of Cheaper Than Dirt and Dick's and brands like that. Do you see anything different with the people you're interacting with in the Second Amendment community?
Generally speaking, probably. I'm only seeing about 10% defend them, and of course, that's backing off more and more.
Yeah. Cool. All right. Whoops. Did we lose? Looks like we lost Carrie. All right. So I guess we had a little connection issue there. Looks like we lost Carrie. But for any of you who are interested in the Second Amendment, in that community, et cetera, I do encourage you guys to go look her up and connect with her. I'm going to pull up her thing again here in a second. Did we lose it? There it is. Pull that up. It should. I can't quite see that if it's got her handle on there, but Carrie Sloan is her name, folks. So if you guys aren't already connected with her or following her on X, I definitely encourage you to do that. Look her up on X. She's super easy to find, lots of great information, and a great human to boot. So that being said, we're going to go ahead and roll into the next segment here, and we're going to talk about 5 pillars. And this is basically the foundation for building your personal brand. And this is something I've talked about a bunch. And basically, it's how you structure all of your content. It's how you put together everything about every piece of communication that goes out, from social media content to email marketing to even your pitches when you're reaching out to journalists. So where a lot of people go wrong is they're just kind of random in their efforts. So what they do is they'll just create content, and it's based on a whim. It's based on whatever topic is interesting to them at that particular point in time, whatever happens to catch their attention. And that's not an effective strategy. So we have to be strategic with our content. So what you have to do is you have to demonstrate your expertise, your personality, and your authority. So when it comes to our expertise, there's a few different ways we can do that. And I like to look at this from the perspective of, basically always be teaching. You don't want to hold anything back. Don't get into this mindset of, oh, well, I can't tell them everything about how to do what I do, because then if I do that, they're going to be able to basically take it, run with it, do it themselves, and not need me anymore. And nothing could be further from the truth, because think about how much you know. You have been doing whatever it is that you're doing for far longer than any amateur. And so you know more about it. So even if you teach them everything, first of all, there's no way you could teach them everything you know. But then beyond that, your industry is always changing. So there's always going to be new things. The industry evolves. So not only do you know what you know now, but things are changing, they're evolving. You're staying up to date on everything. They're not. So by showing and telling exactly how to do what you do, you're not giving the secrets away. You're actually showing them how complex it is, how difficult it is. And you're also showing them why they need you, because you have this expertise, right? If you sat down literally all day and poured everything from your brain into somebody, they still couldn't pick it up and run with it and do what you do, because you've got the knowledge, but you've also got the experience. And so you know how to adapt and change as the situation changes. So one of the things I like to do in this type of content is we explain the why and the how. So why do you need to do things a certain way? Or even why do you need to do certain things? I talk about the why behind why you need a personal brand, for example. When we talk about PR, I say you need a personal brand because people connect with people. They don't connect with faceless entities, right? So I explain the why behind it. And then I also go and I explain how to do that. And by giving them the details, showing them exactly step by step how to do that, and it doesn't have to be all at once. It could be little nuggets here and there. But by showing them exactly how to do it, you're demonstrating your expertise because you're teaching them things that they don't know. And you're showing them all of the stuff behind the scenes. You're basically the Wizard of Oz, kind of pulling that curtain back. You can also share unique data and analysis. So back when I was in the SEO industry, one of the things I used to do is I would analyze what was going on in the search results. And I would say, well, this is what's going on. Here's what I'm seeing. Here's what this data means. And by taking the data itself, the data is cool. People get interested in that. But when you can then analyze that and explain what that means in the real world, that's incredibly useful and profound. And not everyone can do that. So by doing that, you're again showing the depth of your expertise. And then unique insight. So along the same lines, one of the topics I talked about a while back, this was, I think I wrote this article in 2019. I wrote an article about the rise of independent media and basically how independent journalism was becoming just as important as traditional media. And when I first wrote this in 2019, everyone said I was crazy. Oh, public relations is never going to give a shit about independent media. That's what I heard from everybody. Well, now you've got, look at Joe Rogan, for example. You've got independent journalists who have larger audiences than CNN, for Christ's sakes. So by bringing this unique insight, I'm showing a depth of knowledge that a lot of other people don't have. So take that same approach in your content. You see things that others won't. Whatever industry you're in, if I was to look at your industry, I'm going to see certain things. You're going to see a lot more because you have a greater depth of knowledge and a greater breadth of knowledge. So you're going to have data points that wouldn't necessarily mean anything to me. So when you can bring that unique insight to the table, you're now demonstrating your expertise in a very powerful way. And then your personality comes into play here as well. So let's be completely honest. Most content is fucking boring. Most people, they make the mistake of trying to appeal to everyone. So like, oh, well, I have to say this, but I have to kind of stay in the middle. I don't want to go too far here or too far there because then people will think that I'm crazy or that I don't know what I'm talking about. And you're seeing a lot of this over the last year or so in the SEO industry where, throughout the HCU update, which I've talked about on a few of the episodes, a lot of SEO professionals were afraid to call out Google for the bullshit that they were pulling, right? Google has decimated millions upon millions upon millions of websites through their HCU update in an effort to basically take over the internet and make all roads lead to Google. So there's been a small handful of SEO professionals who came out pretty much from the beginning and said, hey, this is bullshit. This is not appropriate. This is not fair. This is not reasonable. And most of the other SEO professionals refused to do that because they didn't want to alienate Google. They wanted to be on Google's good side. And when you're doing that, when you're trying to appeal to everyone and you're trying to kind of stay in the middle of the road, think of it like a possum, right? You got a possum on a busy road and he just tries to hang out in the middle of the road instead of getting off the damn road. He's going to get hit by a car. Same thing happens with your content. If you're just trying to kind of stay in the middle and not veer off at all and just kind of try to appeal to everyone, you're not going to appeal to anyone, because what makes your content really resonate with one particular group of people is going to make a lot of other people hate it. And that's okay. But that's what makes you stand out. That's what makes you different from everybody else. And that's powerful. And so few people are doing it. So if you do that, if you've got the backbone to do that, it's going to make you stand out in a huge way and differentiate you from most of your competitors. And then don't be afraid to use humor. I like to use humor in a lot of my content, and often my humor is a bit dark. Marine Corps veteran, no surprise there. But I use humor wherever I can because that gets people engaged, right? You're triggering this part of their brain where they're going to now be in a different state of mind, and that makes the rest of your content really. Hold on one second. Come back later, please. Come back later, please. Okay. Thank you. All right, we had a little visit from housekeeping here. All right, so where was I? Humor. Okay, so most people do not use humor. Again, and that comes back to they're afraid to alienate anyone. They're afraid to turn anyone off. They're afraid of what people might think. Look, use humor because people are going to resonate with that. It's going to get them engaged in a different way, makes your content more likely to be shared, makes people more interested in what you're saying. So go ahead and roll with that. And then the last thing is authority. So this is kind of a sensitive one. We have to be careful with authority because it is easy to come off kind of douchey if you try to leverage authority the wrong way. You've all seen the old school internet marketing bros with the Lambos, the pictures flashing money and all of that shit. That doesn't work. That's not authority. That's basically just egotistical trash. The way I like to approach leveraging authority in your content is one of the ways is to use your partners or your associations, whether that be individuals, whether that be organizations that you're aligned with, things like that. People will associate you based on who you associate with. So if you're hanging out with, and I don't just mean hanging out like, you're at somebody's party, but hanging out like you're involved in business together, you're on each other's podcasts, you're speaking at events together, stuff like that. With high level people, you'll be perceived as at that same level. You may or may not be at exactly that same level, but the association from being aligned with that person can carry a lot of weight, especially for people who are in that other person or that other organization's audience. Publicity is another way. So obviously that's what my business is built on. When you're featured in the media, that carries a lot of weight because there's a barrier to entry. Not everybody's going to get featured in Entrepreneur Magazine. Not everybody is going to be on Fox Business. So being featured in there, there's the assumption that you've been vetted. Your expertise has been proven. So by being featured, you now are seen as more authoritative. That's why people want to get featured in the media. It's not just because of the exposure that it creates, but it's because of the image, the authority status that it creates. And stage photos are another way to do this. So same principles apply here. They don't ask just everyone to get up on stage and speak. So if you're being asked to be on stage and speak at an event, particularly if you get great video from it, you get great photos from it, you can leverage all of that in your marketing. Now we have to be careful not to be douchey with it. So let's say you've got a stage photo. You can talk about something that you discussed in that presentation. You can talk about something that you taught to the audience, a particular lesson. You can use these photos in your other content. So you're basically leveraging, like we talked about before, the expertise side of things. You're sharing your knowledge, but now you're coupling it with photos or videos of you on stage sharing your knowledge. So you've got that information, but you've also got the authority status that comes from being on stage. So those are the three core components of this. And then now we're going to talk about the 5 pillars themselves. So basically, this is a concept I came up with several years ago, and it's 5 key topics that literally every piece of content is based on. Now, this may sound kind of limiting. It's really not, and I'll explain how in a minute. But these should be generally related in some way. So to give you an example, for mine, I have public relations, I have marketing, I have veterans issues, overcoming adversity, and freedom. Now, I said that everything has to be connected to this. And a lot of people have the misconception that that makes it very limited. Like there's only certain things you could talk about, and all your content is going to be boring because you can only talk about those 5 things. The reality is you can connect almost anything to those 5 topics. So obviously, anything related to the industry, whatever industry you're in, you can connect that to those. This is something that I do a lot. I've talked a lot about, well, we did one today in today's segment. We talked about the Silencer Central's PR crisis. So that's an example. That's something it's a PR crisis. It's related to a company completely outside my industry, but because it's a PR crisis, it's an opportunity for me to take that, break that down, and explain that in a way that demonstrates my expertise as a public relations professional. You can also tie it to trending topics. And that is an example of this as well. This is something I've done with the Blake Lively PR crisis as well. All of the Google updates. So look at what's trending. There's a tab, you got the little search icon on X, and look at what's trending over there. And you'll see a lot of different topics. And I guarantee you, if you sit down for a few minutes, you can find a way to connect any of those trending topics to any of your 5 pillars, right? So this gives you a really broad range of things that you can cover, but it's not always going to be, just talking about the thing, right? So if I'm talking about public relations, I'm now connecting it to these various other things, and it gives me a lot of range in terms of what kind of content I can create. And so this is really important because it creates a consistent brand image for your audience. So you can be talking about a lot of different things, but it's always related to what you do, to the things that you're passionate about, the things that you do in your business. And that consistent brand image makes people remember who you are and what you do. So think about it. There's probably a bunch of people that you can think of who you always see them in your feed. They're constantly showing up. They're constantly posting. Maybe it's funny stuff. Maybe it's great information. Maybe it's annoying information, whatever. But you always see them in your feed, and yet you have no idea what the hell they do. I know I've got a bunch of people like that in my circle where I may know what they do, but I don't really know what they do because they're always posting about just a lot of random shit. Maybe it's memes, maybe it's news articles, maybe it's just random thoughts. But now think about the people who you don't see as often in your feed, but you know exactly what you do, what they do. You know exactly who they are, what they're focused on, what their mission is. And the difference is when they're posting something, it's consistently going to be about that core set of topics, whether they're just talking about those topics or they're connecting those topics to other tangentially related topics as they kind of come up in the news cycle or in the trending kind of zeitgeist of social media. So this is a foundational concept because it's basically what every other part of everything you do in marketing your business or your organization. So this is something you absolutely want to jump on. It is really good for streamlining your content, but keeping it focused on what you're doing. So super powerful. Take advantage of this and you're going to see huge results. All right. So we've got one thing after the PR PSA, but we're going to roll to the PR PSA today. And Jeremy's PR PSA is, if your values don't align with your target audience, then you either need to change your values or change your target audience. Now, I won't generally suggest that you change your values because your values are whatever they are, right? Whatever you believe in is what you believe in. So it's probably not a good idea to change your values because then you'll look wishy-washy. What I do recommend you do is you change your target audience if your values don't align with your values or with their values. So if you believe something that your audience doesn't, and of course you end up facing backlash for that, like we talked about with Silencer Central, you need to then look at a different audience. Now, in their case, they can't really do this. That's not really viable because a silencer company can't just go and find a different target market because their only audience is Second Amendment enthusiasts and a very specific subset of Second Amendment enthusiasts. So this is something you have to really put a lot of thought into as far as what your values are, and does your entire business model align with that in a way that your target audience will resonate with. So this is something we have to really think about before we get fully into our business in the first place. If you find yourself in a position where you're already down the road and you find that you don't align with your target audience, then you have to kind of sit down and have a little soul search and figure out exactly where you want to go. Because the reality is, if your values don't align with your target audience, your business is going to have major problems, and you're just not going to resonate with your industry, with your potential customers. All right, so we're going to close out the show today here with a funny little clip that I came across. This was President Trump being asked a question at a little press conference, and he had a fun little response to this journalist. I'll go ahead and play this, and you guys can check it out.
You mean after this speech?
After this speech, that's what she
I
said.
think so. Well, why don't we see how the vote is? I think it was a great talk. It wasn't a speech. We talked about things. Who do you work for?
Notice.
Who?
Notice.
I don't even know what the hell that is. You gotta get yourself a real job. Let me tell you. I think.
All right, so took a fun little shot at that news outlet that apparently nobody had ever heard of. Anyway, so that's a wrap for today, guys. Hope you guys got a ton of value out of this. Like I said earlier, I do suggest, if you're in the Second Amendment community or have any interest in that kind of stuff, go look up Carrie on X. Super active over there, great person, lots of great information as well. And if you guys got value out of this, I'd love it if you'd join the Facebook group if you're not already in it. Just hit that QR code up there. Check us out on YouTube, and look forward to seeing you all in the next episode. Thanks, everyone.